All right, today we're tackling a big one, the Iran nuclear deal. It was this massive, super controversial agreement, and then poof, it was gone. So we're going to break down exactly what it was, why it all fell apart, and what's happened since. Let's dive in.
You ever notice how in politics, it seems like the first thing a new leader does is tear down whatever the last person built? It happens all the time, right? It's like rule number one, blame the person before you. Well, that whole dynamic, it's pretty much the key to understanding our story today. The story of how a massive international deal was undone.
Okay, so first things first, let's rewind the clock to 2015. We need to get a handle on what this deal, the one put together by the Obama administration, was actually all about.
So its fancy name is the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA for short. And you got to understand, this wasn't just a US and Iran thing. No way. This was a huge international deal. You had all the heavy hitters, China, France, Russia, the UK, the US, plus Germany, all on the same page, with one single massive goal, making sure Iran could not build a nuclear bomb.
And wow, the effect was immediate and just huge. Look at this. Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium, the key ingredient you need for a bomb, was cut by 98%. It went from 10,000 kilograms all the way down to just 300. I mean, that's not just a reduction, that's basically wiping the slate clean.
And it wasn't just about how much uranium they had, it was also about how powerful it was. So the deal put a really strict cap on it, only 3.67% enrichment. Now to put that in perspective, that's enough for nuclear power, but it is nowhere near the 90% plus you'd need to actually build a weapon, a totally different ballgame.
And there's more. The deal also took apart the actual machines that do the enriching. The number of centrifuges Iran could run, it dropped from 19,000 down to 6,000. And it's not like they were on their own. International inspectors had basically round-the-clock access to make sure everything was on the level.
So as you can imagine, the folks who negotiated this thing were pretty proud of it. The lead US negotiator, Wendy Sherman, she basically said, look, this is the strongest anti-nuclear weapon deal ever made. And for a while there, it was working. All the international monitors were saying, yep, Iran is holding up its end of the bargain.
But then everything changed. In 2018, the whole thing got flipped on its head when President Trump announced that the United States was pulling out, just walking away from the deal.
And look, this wasn't some small disagreement over details. This was two completely different versions of reality. The Trump administration was calling it a terrible deal, saying all it did was kick the can down the road on an Iranian bomb. But the people who supported it, they were saying no. This thing was a huge success. It shut down every single path to a weapon and gave us a way to keep talking.
Now, the source material we're looking at today suggests this wasn't just about policy differences. It makes the case that the decision to pull out was really personal, that it was about undoing one of President Obama's biggest signature achievements. The idea that Obama was getting credit for this deal, well, that was apparently a major issue.
So what happens when you pull a central pillar out of a deal like that? Well, the fallout was pretty intense. Once the US was out and slapped sanctions back on, things on the ground started to change, and they changed fast. And the results were pretty much immediate. Remember that 3.67% limit we talked about? Well, with the US out, Iran cranked its enrichment way, way up. They eventually hit 60% purity, and that is uncomfortably close to weapons grade. All those strict limits from the deal? Gone. And of course, when you enrich more, your stockpile grows. The deal had it capped at a safe 300 kilograms. Now, sources estimate Iran has something like 440 kilograms of this highly enriched stuff. And what that really means is that the breakout time, the time it would take them to actually build a bomb if they decided to, got a whole lot shorter. So this all leads us to where we are now, in a much, much trickier situation. Because pulling out of the deal didn't just affect Iran's centrifuges. No, it sent shockwaves across the entire geopolitical map.
So what was the final bill for the United States in all of this? Let's take a look at what the source says were the actual consequences for America after it walked away from the agreement.
And according to our source, the price was steep. On the economic front, you're talking huge costs for a bigger military footprint in the Middle East. Diplomatically, a big hit to America's reputation. We looked like a country that couldn't be trusted to keep its word. Strategically, Iran just got tougher and more defiant, which makes any future negotiation way harder. And on the world stage, it left a power vacuum. And you know who stepped right in? China.
So when you look at the big picture, the source presents this really stark contrast.
You have one path, the Obama path, which used diplomacy to stop a nuclear threat, and then you have the other path, the Trump path, which led to a lot more conflict, a more dangerous Iranian nuclear program, and now the risk that any future deal will be much, much worse for us.
Which really leaves us with one big nagging question. The deal, by a lot of measures, seemed to be working. It was keeping Iran's nuclear program in a box. So, by tearing it up, did the United States end up creating a bigger, more dangerous problem for itself down the road? Did it, in essence, shoot itself in the foot? That's the question at the very heart of this story.